After the turning point, the war did not end. It moved toward its final chapter. A chapter already written long ago in the pages of the Bible. Milky Way, the prophecy unfolds. Ancient words began to come alive. Warnings that many ignored started becoming reality. The signs were clear. Division increased. Truth became blurred. Faith was tested like never before. But these were not random events. They were part of a divine plan. Crowned the return of the King. The promise was always there. That Jesus Christ would return. Not as a teacher this time, but as a king. Not in silence, but in glory. The skies would open. Light would descend. And every soul would witness the truth. Crossed swords, the final stand. Darkness, led by Satan, prepared for one last rebellion. Deception reached its peak. Fear spread across nations. Many lost their way. But heaven was not silent. The great archangel Michael rose again. This time, not just to defend, but to end the war. Fire the battle of all battles. This was not like before. No more hidden whispers. No more silent influence. This was the final confrontation. Light against darkness. Truth against deception. Eternity against destruction. And this time, there would be no second chance for darkness. Globe showing Europe, Africa, the judgment. Every soul stood before truth. Not judged by power, but by choices. Every action, every intention, every hidden moment revealed. Some stepped into light. Others turned away. Because the choice was always theirs. Sunrise, a new beginning. And then, silence. Darkness fell. Not as a force, but as a memory. Light remained. Peace returned. A new world began. A world without fear. Without pain. Without deception. Sparkles the eternal message. The war of angels and demons was never just about heaven. It was about humanity. About the heart. About choice. About truth. And even now, that choice still exists. Glowing star, final line, powerful ending. In the end, light does not win by force. It wins when you choose it. After the war was over, there was something the universe had not felt for ages: silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of peace. The fall of Satan had ended the final rebellion, and for the first time, darkness no longer had a voice. The earth itself seemed to breathe again. Where chaos once ruled, calm now existed. Where fear once controlled hearts, peace now filled every soul. Humanity stood in a world completely changed. The pain, the suffering, the confusion, all gone. Not hidden. Not forgotten, but healed. The promise written long ago in the Bible had finally come true. A new world had begun. A world where there was no death, no sorrow, no hatred. At the center of this new reality stood Jesus Christ. Not as a teacher walking among people, but as the eternal King. His presence was everywhere, not seen with eyes alone, but felt deep within every heart. People did not fear anymore. They understood. They knew truth without doubt, without confusion. The angels, led by Michael, were still present. But they were no longer warriors. Their purpose had changed. They walked beside humanity as guardians of peace. They guided, not by force, but by presence. They protected, not from danger, but as a symbol of what once was. Humanity itself was transformed. No longer weak. No longer divided. Every person carried light within them. Not borrowed, but their own. There was no jealousy. No pride. No hatred. Only understanding. Only connection. But even in this perfect world, the memory of darkness remained. Not as a threat, but as a lesson. People remembered what it felt like to be lost. To be afraid. To be deceived. And because of that memory, they valued the light even more. They finally understood something that was once a mystery. Why evil was allowed to exist. Because without choice, love is meaningless. Every soul had been given a choice. And those choices had shaped eternity. Time itself no longer existed the way it once did. There was no rush, no past, no future. Only the present moment, eternal and complete. Families that were once separated were reunited. There were no more goodbyes. No more loss. Only connection that would never break again. Something even more incredible began to happen. The light that once guided humanity from outside, now lived within them. Every human became a source of light. A reflection of divine truth. Darkness could never return. Not because it was being held back, but because there was no place left for it to exist. The greatest truth of the war was finally understood. It was never about destruction. It was about transformation. Humanity was not just saved. They were changed. With no fear and no struggle, a new purpose emerged. Not survival, but creation. People began to build, to explore, to create beauty. Art, knowledge, and discovery became the new path. Not driven by need, but by joy. The universe itself opened in ways never imagined. Worlds beyond Earth became reachable. Humanity was no longer limited. They became explorers of creation itself. And through it all, the presence of Jesus Christ remained constant. Not distant. Not above. But within. I am with you always. Those words were no longer just a promise. They were reality. One question still remained in the minds of many. What truly happened to darkness? It did not hide. It did not escape. It ended. Because truth had fully exposed it. And what is fully revealed cannot survive. Light filled everything. Not harsh, not overwhelming, but warm and peaceful. There was no night. Only an eternal dawn. Human thinking itself had changed. No confusion. No doubt. Truth was understood instantly. Love became something beyond human definition. It was no longer an emotion. It was existence itself. The lessons of the war were never forgotten. Truth matters. Choice matters. Light must be chosen. And that choice had defined eternity. The story of angels and demons was never just a battle in the sky. It was a journey within the human soul. A journey from darkness to light. From fear to peace. From confusion to truth. And in the end, there was no more war. No more struggle. Only existence in its purest form. Because light did not just defeat darkness. It transformed everything. Darkness was powerful, but temporary. Light was quiet, but eternal. And in the end, eternity belongs to the light. After eternity had begun, something unexpected happened. Even in a world of perfect peace, existence did not stop. It expanded. The new world was not an ending. It was a beginning beyond imagination. Humanity, now transformed, began to understand creation in a way never possible before. They could feel the structure of reality itself. They could sense the balance of existence. It was as if every soul had awakened to a higher awareness. No longer limited by physical boundaries, they started exploring beyond Earth. Not with machines, but with understanding. The universe unfolded before them like an open book. Galaxies, stars, and worlds that once felt unreachable were now within reach. Every new place they encountered reflected the same truth. Light existed everywhere. There were worlds filled with beauty beyond words. Landscapes that seemed alive with harmony. Colors never seen before. And in every corner of creation, there was peace. Humanity was no longer just living. They were discovering. With every discovery, their understanding of truth deepened. They realized something powerful. Creation was not random. It was intentional. Every detail, every structure, every form of life. Connected. At the center of this infinite creation remained a constant presence. Jesus Christ, through consciousness itself. I am with you always. Those words were no longer heard. They were experienced. Time continued to have no control. There was no aging. No decay. Only continuous growth. Human minds evolved beyond limitation. They could understand complex truths instantly. They could communicate without words. Connection was no longer physical. It was spiritual. There was no misunderstanding. Every thought carried clarity. Every intention carried truth. But as humanity explored deeper into existence, a profound realization emerged. They began to ask, what lies beyond even this? Is creation infinite? Or does it have a final edge? This question did not come from fear, but from curiosity. And curiosity was now pure. The journey expanded further. Beyond galaxies. Beyond dimensions. Into realms that could not be described by human language. These were realms of pure energy. Pure light. Places where existence was not material, but fully spiritual. In these realms, humanity encountered something extraordinary. Not beings of darkness, but higher forms of light. Entities that existed beyond even angelic forms. They were not separate from creation. They were part of its deeper structure. They did not speak, but their presence communicated truth. From them, humanity learned something even greater. Creation is layered. What they had experienced so far was only one level. Beyond it, there were endless layers of existence. Each more vast. Each more profound. Each closer to the ultimate truth. And yet, no matter how far they went, one thing remained constant. Light. There was no darkness anywhere. Because darkness had never been a true force. It was only the absence of light. And now, light filled everything. As understanding grew, humanity no longer saw themselves as separate beings. They saw themselves as part of a greater whole. Individual, yet connected. Unique, yet united. The idea of division no longer existed. There were no nations. No conflicts. Only unity in diversity. Each soul had its own purpose. But all purposes aligned. Creation itself became a shared experience. They began to shape new worlds. Not out of necessity, but creativity. Worlds of beauty. Worlds of harmony. Places where new forms of life could grow. Guided by light. They were no longer just part of creation. They were co-creators within it. But even in this infinite expansion, a deeper truth slowly revealed itself. The closer they moved toward the center of existence, the more intense the light became. Not painful, but overwhelming in its purity. It was as if all of creation pointed toward one ultimate source. And that source was beyond full comprehension. Humanity approached it with awe. Not fear, but respect. Because they understood. This was the origin of everything. The source of all light. All truth. All existence. And yet, they also realized something humbling. No matter how much they evolved, they would never fully become the source. They were part of it, but not equal to it. This realization did not bring limitation. It brought peace, because they understood their place. Not small, but meaningful. Not infinite, but connected to the infinite. And in that connection, they found complete fulfillment. The journey never ended. There was always more to discover, more to understand, more to experience. Eternity was not static. It was alive. It was growth without end, exploration without limit, understanding without boundary. And through it all, one truth remained unchanged. Light is eternal. It does not fade. It does not weaken. It only expands. The story that began with a war in the heavens ended in infinite peace. But that peace was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of something far greater. Because existence itself is a journey that never truly ends. And in that endless journey, humanity found its greatest purpose: to live in light, to grow in truth, to exist in eternal peace, and beyond all understanding, to be part of something greater than themselves, something eternal, something infinite, something divine. Beyond infinite exploration, beyond endless creation, beyond even the understanding of light itself, something began to change. Not in the universe, but within the awareness of humanity. They had reached a level where questions were no longer about the outside world. They turned inward. For the first time since the beginning of eternity, humanity began to ask a deeper question. What are we, truly? Not as individuals, not as creators, but as existence itself. This question did not come from confusion. It came from awakening. Because even in infinite knowledge, there was still a mystery. Humanity had explored galaxies. They had moved through dimensions. They had witnessed layers of creation beyond imagination. But now, they realized something unexpected. The greatest mystery was not out there. It was within. They began to observe their own consciousness. Not their thoughts, but the source of their thoughts. Not their actions, but the awareness behind every action. And slowly, a realization began to form. They were not just beings inside creation. They were observers of creation. Witnesses. Every experience, every moment, every reality they explored was being observed from within. This awareness had always been there. Even in the old world. Even during the war between light and darkness. But it was hidden beneath fear, distraction, and limitation. Now, with no darkness left, nothing blocked it anymore. Humanity began to experience pure awareness. A state beyond thought. Beyond identity. They could exist without needing form. They could observe without needing movement. They could understand without needing explanation. And in this state, something extraordinary happened. They realized they were connected not only to creation, but to the source itself. Not as equals, but as reflections. Like light reflected in countless mirrors. Each mirror unique, but the light the same. This realization changed everything. Individual identity did not disappear, but it transformed. Ego no longer existed. There was no "I am better." No "I am separate." Only a simple truth remained. I am part of something infinite. And in that understanding came complete peace. But the journey did not stop. As awareness deepened, humanity began to experience something even beyond light. Silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of completeness. A silence so full that nothing needed to be added. In that silence, there was no time, no movement, no change, just pure existence. And in that moment, humanity touched something beyond creation itself. Something that could not be described. Not light. Not energy. Not form. It was the origin of everything. Before everything. The source beyond the source. They could not fully understand it. But they could feel it. And what they felt was beyond love. Beyond peace. Beyond anything that had ever been known. It was absolute. And then, something unexpected happened. They returned. Back to creation. Back to form. Back to identity. But they were not the same. They carried that awareness within them. Now, every action, every creation, every experience was done with complete understanding. They no longer searched for meaning. Because they had become aligned with it. Life was no longer a journey to find truth. It was a continuous expression of truth. Humanity now lived in two states at once. Fully present in creation. And deeply connected to the source. They could create worlds. And at the same time, remain completely still within. Action and stillness became one. Movement and silence became one. Existence and awareness became one. This was the highest evolution. Not power. Not knowledge. But balance. Perfect balance. And in this balance, humanity discovered the final truth of their existence. They were not created just to live. They were created to reflect. To reflect the light. To reflect truth. To reflect the divine. And through that reflection, creation itself became more beautiful. More meaningful. More alive. Because the purpose of existence was never just to exist. It was to experience. To express. To become. And to return. Not once. But endlessly. Eternity was not a straight line. It was a cycle. A cycle of awareness, creation, discovery, and return. And in every cycle, understanding deepened. Expansion continued. But something always remained constant. The light. The same light that began everything. The same light that ended darkness. The same light that lived within every soul. And now, that light was no longer something to reach. It was something they were. The story of angels, demons, war, and victory had led to this. Not just peace. Not just eternity. But awakening. The ultimate awakening. And in that awakening, there was no fear. No doubt. No separation. Only truth. Only light. Only existence in its purest, highest form. And even beyond that, the journey continued. Because infinity has no end.